and I remain amazed at the discourse or lack thereof around the Middle East situation. Obviously, we're trying to remedy it here in our own way, but here to talk about that with us now in the studio is our good friend, Max Blumenthal. So first of all, Max, welcome back.
Great to be back.
Secondly, Iran. We've been talking about it, but it seems to me like there is no bigger deal, maybe nowadays, than the fact that the President of the United States has pulled out of the Iran deal, which is unprecedented, I think, in terms of a rejection of a multilateral agreement. It carries within it this implicit threat of sanctions or other confrontations, not just with Iran, but with Russia, with China, with Great Britain, with France, with the European community, right? So why is it that I walk around with the sense that we should be talking about this more?
Yeah. I mean, not only is Trump risking or actually possibly moving towards a war with Netanyahu pushing him in that direction. And if anyone paid attention to American cable news last night, they probably didn't know that there was the largest confrontation between the Syrian and Israeli military, started by Israel unilaterally without provocation since 1974. That it really shows how dangerous this scenario is. But there's also a trade war heating up between the U.S. and Europe. The Trump administration is telling Airbus, the French company, that they can't participate in the building of civilian airliners in Iran. The Trump administration is telling Germany that their companies have to pull out of Iran. And Boeing, which was supposed to build civilian airliners in Iran, has put about 100,000 jobs at risk, American jobs, because of Trump pulling out of the Iran deal. This is a huge deal that is pushing us at least closer to World War III. I'm not saying we're on the brink of World War III, but you would think that this would be, on the tip of every pundit's tongue, and everyone would be bashing Trump for it. And definitely he's getting a lot of criticism for it, a lot more than he got for bombing Syria on the basis of social media, because this is part of Obama's legacy. But we're not. I mean, I really think this should be a much bigger deal in Washington and across the country.
Yeah, I do too, and I have to say that while the responsibility lies with Trump, of course, and the Republicans, I have to say that I think a lot of Democrats set the mood for this, because when Obama did the Iran deal, which arguably is one of the, if not the major foreign policy accomplishment of a Democratic president in 20 years, at least, there were a lot of Democrats who badmouthed it, even some of those who voted for it in the end, like Chuck Schumer. This is not a good deal. I don't trust those people. They're a threat to us, laying a kind of rhetorical seed corn for this to happen.
Yeah.
And so I feel as if bad-mouthing Iran, and I'm not saying they're perfect, but bad-mouthing Iran became such a rhetorical, reflexive gesture in Washington that now it's kind of, it made it easier for Trump to do this. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And when Chuck Schumer came out, I guess yesterday, and condemned Trump for pulling out of the Iran deal, Trump correctly pointed out that you were the biggest opponent in Congress of the Iran deal. You were attacking it left and right. You were the biggest opponent of Obama, and now you're attacking me purely for partisan reasons. You have no principles at all. And there's just simply nothing Chuck Schumer can say back to that. We have to recognize why Chuck Schumer opposed the Iran deal and why Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. For the same reason, Israeli influence in American politics. Israel has not only destabilized the Middle East, it's destabilized our political system. And it is impossible or very difficult for the U.S. to not only get into a stabilizing treaty like the JCPOA, which was a boon to the reformist camp in Iran of Hassan Rouhani and his foreign minister, Javad Zarif, who are, they want to work with the West. It's impossible because of the power of the Israel lobby in American politics and the threat that Israel poses to its neighbors in the Middle East. And both Schumer and Trump Somehow, Trump presents himself as this kind of self-made billionaire, but we have to recognize that three other billionaires, Bernard Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, Paul Singer, so kind of vulture capitalist who tanked Argentina's economy and funds half the neocon think tanks in Washington, and Sheldon Adelson, who a lot of your viewers probably have heard of, the casino billionaire. They donated over $40 million to Trump's campaign through super PACs. They donated a lot of money to Nikki Haley. If she's going to run for president, they're going to be the force behind her. They donated a lot to Tom Cotton, who in the Senate helped shape Trump's Iran policy. So these figures were really shaping Trump's policy. And at the same time, you had figures on the Democratic side like Haim Saban, one of the top donors to the Obama and Clinton campaigns, and is, involved with Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is basically the man of the Israel lobby in Wall Street in New York.
And Haim Saban, by the way, important figure in all of this, funding a think tank as well. And
all the Iran think tank, anti-Iran think tanks in town are funded by these figures.
And in looking at, so first of all, on the Republican side now, you have Sheldon Adelson saying just this week, pledging $30 million to the Republican Party for the November elections. And in looking at this myself, by the way, I came across apparently there was someone who ran for president in 2016 named Hillary Clinton. There was a talk she gave where she said that by the way, I saw her as bad-mouthing the Iran deal all along, or certainly sending negative signals about it. And there was a talk she gave during the election where she said she was going to renew the special relationship not only with Israel, but with Bibi Netanyahu specifically. She said, I'm going to renew the relationship with Bibi Netanyahu. Every morning I wake up and I check social media. Bibi's not in jail yet. I mean, that in and of itself, but I'm assuming that charges are going to be filed against him any day. Is that a fair assumption, or is he going to slip away somehow?
The top police officials of Israel, all of them concur. All of the top law enforcement officials concur that Netanyahu should be indicted for corruption. There have been massive protests calling for Netanyahu to be jailed for corruption. And as you mentioned, Hillary Clinton, I think one of her first public statements as a candidate on the Middle East was a condemnation of the BDS movement, the Palestine Solidarity Movement, and the letter, it was a public letter addressed to Haim Saban, one of her top donors. I mean, how much more nakedly opportunistic can you get than that? So, I mean, we're talking about the bipartisan influence of the Israel lobby and the U.S. pulling out of a deal that was working. There's no one who can deny that it was working. Even the chief of staff of the Israeli army, Gadi Eisenkot, said that the Iran deal was working. In March, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, affirmed that Iran was complying with its end of the bargain. The State Department confirmed that Iran was complying with its end of the bargain. And now the Trump administration's unilaterally pulled out. We're witnessing chaos in the Middle East as Israel is trying to provoke Iran to respond to its attacks. And we have to be very clear about what's happening in Syria. Israel is attacking what it sees as Iranian assets. It's killing Iranian military officials. It's killing commanders who are there to fight al-Qaeda and ISIS. And if Iran responds, Israel can say, we're in a war with Iran. Come on, America, help us out here. What are you doing? And the Trump administration, I don't know what they're going to do. But last night, Iran did not respond. The Syrian military responded. And you see wall-to-wall mainstream media saying Iran responded to Israeli strikes. That didn't happen. Iran is still behaving like the adult in the room in Syria, but we're on the precipice of something very dangerous as a result of this situation. I don't think people understand the context behind it and how, whatever you think of Iran, they are not the aggressor here.
And I think another dimension, I have to say, and I was thinking about this as you were talking, that when I was a little kid in Hebrew school in the 1960s, nobody ever said to us, kids, there's going to be a day, and we were given all the, plant a tree and all that in Israel and all that. Nobody ever said there's going to be a day when there's a corrupt guy running Israel, trying to provoke a war, trying to make us fight that war. There's going to be political influence that compromises. I even remember this is what I don't think my teachers in Hebrew school liked me. When I was in the sixth grade, I remember asking the rabbi, if there were a war between Israel and the United States, which side should we be on? And he said, that would never happen. It would never happen. And I said, oh, granted. But if it was, morally, which side should she be on? Should we be on? He said, Israel. And now I think that whole loyalty to Israel at any cost is changing in the Jewish American community and in the diaspora community. I think that more people are seeing that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is indefensible. I think more people are seeing, but I could be wrong. But that's my sense from the polling data and other sources. So how do you see this playing out? Because I see on the one hand a loss of political support in the long run for Israel, a building up of the call for boycott, divestments, and sanctions as a result of all this, even as we have Democrats, like some of the ones we've mentioned, actually arguing against the constitutional right of free speech when it comes to advocating for boycott, for BDS. But that's more of a long-run scenario. In the short run, I see the real possibility of war. I don't know. What are your thoughts about short and long run?
Well, I mean, first of all, on the domestic side, I mean, the political sweet spot for Israel and the pro-Israel lobby is increasingly in the reddest of red states, and Israel is becoming a wedge issue within the Democratic Party, especially in blue districts. Pay close attention to the race between Cuomo and Cynthia Nixon in New York. Andrew Cuomo, guess where he's going today? To Israel. He's trying to exploit pro-Israel support against Nixon, who's been somewhat critical, and they've sent Alan Dershowitz to attack her. So it's becoming, it's getting a little complicated for pro-Israel Democrats. In South Carolina, you have a bill being introduced, which is on the verge of passing, which will criminalize support for BDS, criminalize the free speech of people who believe that Palestinians should have equal human rights. You have on May 15th the culmination of the Great March of Return in Gaza. These are the marches you've been seeing where basically desperate people who've been under siege for 10 years, who are refugees, who've been kept away from their homes and land for 70 years, are rushing a heavily militarized border and being gunned down by Israeli snipers, having their legs blown off. Journalists are being killed covering it. Children who are totally unarmed have been shot by snipers. I mean, these are snipers with scopes. And on that day, my colleague Dan Cohen and I will come out with our documentary called Killing Gaza, which we've spent 3 years making, mostly inside the Gaza Strip. And I hope, American Jews who have questions about Israel will watch it and see what it's really like inside the Gaza Strip and see the hell that we've helped create. The U.S. has created this hell under the influence of the pro-Israel lobby, and there's no strategic reason or geopolitical reason for doing so. I think, we've lifted the mask on the real Israel that the pro-Israel lobbies tried to cover up, and people see it for what it is. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party is not democratic. It's not going to listen to its constituents who feel that Palestinians should have equal rights. And our foreign policy is absolutely undemocratic. People are not engaged in the foreign policy discussions. And you watch MSNBC, you watch CNN, they're doing everything they can to keep to make sure that that's the case. Constant wall-to-wall reporting on smutty legal intrigues about Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen or Russiagate. Very little on real critical international issues that people should know about. And if they did know about it, I think it would be very uncomfortable for a lot of powerful forces in Washington.
And speaking of Russia, if we want to close on that topic of Russia, I had somebody say to me the other day, you're a Russia skeptic. And my answer to that was, I'm a journalist. I'm an everything skeptic. I don't believe anything just because a government source tells me. Especially if it's James Clapper, who's a known perjurer, who clearly perjured himself before Congress and faced no sanctions for it. So yes, I mean, I want to know the whole story. And I think if crimes are committed, they must be punished. But yes, of course I'm a skeptic. One of the things that has astounded me in following this whole story has been the lack of skepticism among people who are nominally journalists by profession.
Yeah, I think in journalistic culture, in Beltway journalistic culture, you're supposed to put aside your skepticism. You're supposed to kind of avoid looking for hard evidence of all of these allegations about Russian collusion and just go after the president, just target him. And at the end of the day, we're going to get the president, and then we're all going to say this was an even bigger than Watergate, and we were Bernstein and Woodward. We are the heroes, and it doesn't matter what damage was done to U.S.-Russian relations. It doesn't matter what's happening in Ukraine or Syria. Who cares? We are the heroes, and let's claim our award. And so far, none of that has happened. They've proven nothing. A lot of them have been embarrassed. And there's a giant cover-up around the story you mentioned of James Clapper's leak to Jake Tapper, who won an award at the White House Press Correspondents' Dinner, for a fake story that was leaked to him by the Director of National Intelligence about a dossier that's been mostly discredited. So, now it's at a point where we're not even talking about, oh, it's another Watergate, we're going to win our awards. It's about, let's circle the wagons. The skeptics are actually scaring us, and we screwed up really bad. So let's just keep patting each other on the back, pretending like it's okay. And Trump's making it easy for them to do so because he behaves in such a monstrous and juvenile way that it's easy for them.
And then they can say what they're really interested in is defending political norms, which means they'll be very happy to have Mike Pence back and all the other people.
Our institutions.
When our institutions have been failing us for years. Last comment, because we're going to run out of time, but White House Correspondents' Dinner, I've been sitting on this since the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Everybody in this town was outraged by Michelle Wolf, the comedian, for what I thought were utterly reasonable comments. Utterly reasonable. But you know when people weren't outraged at the White House Correspondents' Dinner? When Barack Obama made a joke about killing teenagers with drones. Remember that in 2011, which he was actually doing at the time? That was okay. That was not outside the bounds of good taste, but Michelle Wolf's humor was. I'll give you the last word.
Well, Larry Wilmore was attacked for saying that Obama's like Steph Curry. They like to drop bombs from long range. I mean, that was considered very distasteful. What happened to Larry Wilmore after that?
Right.
Where'd he go?
Right.
He disappeared, and Trevor Noah, the kind of suck-up, centrist establishment goofball, came in and filled the void that used to be sort of semi-critical on Comedy Central.
I had the mental image as you said that of waking up in a tiny dark room with you and me and Larry Wilmore saying, oh yeah, okay, this is where we're all going to wind up. Let's hope that's not the case.
Next up, Larry Wilmore.
To the wall. All right, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but Max Blumenthal, always great to see you, and thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.